Well, hello everyone. This is Dr. Song, and I'm joined by Dr. Christopher Quinn, one of our board members, as well as a professor of education for me. He actually was the one who taught me in grad school in the EDD program at APU, and you were also my dissertation chair. And we won't talk about my dissertation here, but so today we're talking to Dr. Quinn about professional development of teachers. How do we develop teachers? How do we make them better than what they are? How do we make them more effective? How do we support them? In the past, you've done a lot of work with public school, and you talked in the first episode about doing different types of professional development, from groups to smaller groups and individuals to actually intervention or being right there. So in the past, you've done training at our school for teachers in large groups where you model teaching. I remember from the popsicle sticks in the bottle and calling to. I remember we talked about assessment, how poor teachers are when it comes to creating their own assessment. Because I think that's what I observe in many classrooms too, that teachers think that they're great test makers and they're great quiz makers, but they're not. And they don't see the pitfalls of, say, creating a lot of times, like history and English teachers think that it's easy to just make open-ended questions, and they think that they're not giving any answers. They're really tough questions, but they don't realize how tough it is to grade them, to be fair. And when it comes to, say, multiple choice questions, they could be just as rigorous as open-ended questions if done right. But we're not trained as psychometricians, and we don't have the professional skills to do that. So we need to rely on proven methods, and sometimes questions or banks are there provided by the publishers themselves, right, who employ others. So there's so much that we as teachers need to know. And it is a daunting task, isn't it? Because it's not just about having a heart toward the children. It's not like I like to teach them. Well, you have to be good at teaching, and that means you have to develop your skills at teaching. And it could make one feel a little bit overwhelmed with so many duties and responsibilities associated with teaching.
That is correct.
Have you seen that in a lot of teachers, not only new teachers, but I think even with seasoned teachers, as you mentioned in the past, about teachers wanting to learn and develop something? Because it's just, there's a gamut of skills that we have to acquire and develop.
That is correct. There are a wide variety of things that people need to do. Most teachers are very good at their subject matter. In other words, they understand their subject matter at the secondary level. At the elementary level, we see that historically, elementary teachers are usually stronger at teaching language arts than they are at teaching math. Some don't even, they may not even teach science, may not even teach art or music, because the reality is that elementary teachers are expected to teach all these different areas, which,
right,
frankly, doesn't always work very well. But the idea is they need the development in the subject areas, because they're typically strong in the two most important things that elementary teachers do: teaching students how to read, how to write, how to do math. It's not only teaching them how to do those things, it's helping the students to acquire a love for reading, a love for writing, and growing up without a fear of mathematics. That's one of the biggest problems in the American educational system, as too many kids grow up fearful of math. They don't really get it, and it goes back to their elementary school teacher. At the secondary level, many teachers who teach in their content area, they're a history teacher, they're a science teacher, they're a math teacher. So they know their subject area, but knowing your subject area and knowing how to teach a specific group of students requires a unique set of skills. So one of the problems with math teachers is, and I was a math teacher, was they know their content area. And we typically pick our content area because we're good at it. We like history, we like math, we like science. And so as a result, we think, well, since it was easy for me to learn, that it should be easy for other people to learn. That is not true. Not everyone loves math like the math teacher does. Not everyone loves science like the science teacher does. Right. So as a result, these teachers, and again, I emphasize at the secondary level, have to learn how do I transfer my love for my subject area and understanding of my subject area to the students so that they understand it. They're not afraid of it. They can do it. And that is one of the things that I was able to learn how to do myself and help other teachers learn how to do as well. How do you help other people develop the teaching skills so that the students can do it? And one of the things that I learned as a consultant was that's the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah.
For success.
I mean, you know that I think you're aware of the fact that over 15 years ago, I made a decision to put fourth and fifth graders into the rotation of middle schoolers so that they could learn from subject specialists.
Right.
Because what I've seen in the TIMS, Test of International Math and Science Skills, is basically that math and science skills in this country were kind of comparable in first and second and third grade with a lot of OECD nations. But once it became like seventh grade, we were like a semester to a year behind.
Right.
I think in ninth and 10th grade, we're more than a year and a half behind. I mean, once in a while, we have these international students visiting us for during summer school, like middle and high school. They look at our math curriculum in the US and they go like, well, I learned this 2 years ago. Now, I get that. A lot of Asian countries, they have a way of advancing math and science more than other countries, but still, now, compare the United States with, say, Eastern European countries like Russia. We're way, way behind in those countries. So we made this novel change at New Covenant Academy to have our fourth and fifth graders be taught by subject specialists, and kids love it. Now, there are some other negative sides to it, right? The social aspect, peer relations, and not having a homeroom teacher to really adjudicate some of the peer conflicts that they're having. But nonetheless, as far as their learning and interest in the subject goes, it has really fueled their learning for math and science. And I think that's the result of using research to really, really change the way you teach students rather than, well, fourth and fifth belong in elementary school and that's the way it's going to be, you know? And so when you look at all these different aspects, and you talked about high school teachers, I love the fact that you mentioned the high school math, because I was a stereotypical good math Asian student.
Mm-hmm.
My junior year in trigonometry, I had a soccer teacher from England who was teaching me math, Mr. Davies. I will never forget that. He loved soccer players. He did not love football players. I am a football player. And he said, well, American football is not football. Soccer is football. and what happened was that he had a way of he became my barrier. He turned me off to math.
Oh, no.
And he would say things like, well, you're an Asian student, so you should know this already. Apparently, he has taught my brother and my other brother before me. Like, your brothers knew this stuff. Why don't you know this? I'm like, okay. Well, the bottom line is the teacher made it difficult for me to learn math because he expected me to know. And I was a really, really good student. I ended up finishing calculus in high school, but still that year was very difficult because a teacher became a barrier for me. He wasn't facilitating my learning. He actually turned me off to math learning. So what do you got to say about a math teacher like that?
Well, that sounds like my chemistry teacher. That was my senior year, and I was in the senior class play, and I had a lead role. And so I was going to rehearsals, I was memorizing lines, and then we had our performances. And so I was not spending as much time on the chemistry as I should have, so which was my fault. But he was not really sympathetic. He didn't provide any additional support to help me get through that. So I can't completely blame him, but the whole process created a negative experience for me. Which I don't think was his intention. I don't think he had anything against me personally, but he did get a little. He actually told me if I don't turn around quickly, then I'm not going to do well in the class, which I didn't. So my point is, how do we help teachers like that? Because your trigonometry teacher and my chemistry teacher, those two teachers are probably not teaching anymore, but there are teachers just like them who are still teaching.
That's right.
They're still around. So one of the major components of high quality professional development is evidence. In other words, we're going to make decisions, professional development decisions based on the evidence. You mentioned test scores a few minutes ago. So we have school test scores, we have departmental test scores, we have standardized test scores. We look at grades. Those are more of the macro evidence that we would see. The micro evidence would be similar to what I mentioned in the first podcast, where you as a principal or what I did as a principal would meet with a teacher, talk about some of the specific things that they feel like they need to grow in. Then I would go into the classroom and I would collect the data. I would do it. I was also in a school where the teachers did it among themselves. They would do peer coaching. So it doesn't necessarily
which happens here at our school constantly.
Excellent. Excellent. That is actually less threatening. When the principal comes in, it's like, well, he's going to write my evaluation, or she's going to write my evaluation. So it's somewhat more threatening. The advantage of the peer coaching is these are my colleagues. They're not writing my evaluation. So it has a huge amount of value. But it still comes down to evidence. It still comes down to a standard. In other words, what is the standard that New Covenant Academy is using? In other words, how do we know this is an effective class or not? What are the standards we're using? I'm not talking about the content standards. I'm talking about the instructional standards, the professional standards that are critical to a high quality program like New Covenant has. So being aware of those standards, helping the teachers to understand those standards, and then collecting the data, otherwise known as the evidence. How can we help teachers see? Because in the course, I don't remember the numbers. Dr. Song, you might remember these numbers, but you've heard those numbers that in a course of a class period, how many decisions a teacher has to make.
I think the word is gazillion.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can quantify that, but I think that's a gazillion.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. So as a result, for the principal to come in, a colleague to come in to collect some data, because the teacher, even though he or she thinks, well, I should be spending more time on checking for understanding. I should be spending more time on giving more examples, or I should be spending more time on modeling this particular procedure. You know all that, but in the course of all the things that go on in a classroom, it's very difficult to stay focused on all the things that you would like to be focused on as a classroom teacher. So having another set of eyes come in, friendly eyes, you're there to just collect data and then step to the teacher and say, here's what I'm seeing in your class, and what do you think? And so that can be the principal, that can be the colleague, but the bottom line is that's based on evidence. It's not opinion, it's not subjective, it's evidence-based. And so collecting evidence-based. So setting that up ahead of time, everyone knows what the standards are, everyone knows how data is going to be collected, everyone knows how data is going to be shared or not shared. I had a problem with that in some schools, where some schools, they wanted to be able to share the data within their grade level. This was an elementary school. We all want to know how we're all doing. We're all third grade teachers. How are all the third grade teachers doing? Other groups, they were not comfortable with that. They feel threatened by sharing data with each other, even though they're all teaching the same subject, teaching the same material, using the same resources. And so in some grade levels, they say, no, we all want to know how are we all doing?
Right.
Or we look at Mrs. Powell's class here. Wow, her kids are they're doing really well. Mrs. Powell, what are you doing in your classroom? So the advantages of sharing that type of assessment data in that particular school and that particular grade level, that was very powerful, because then Mrs. Powell was saying, here's how I do it.
Right. So it's almost like maybe the culture of the organization. If you're all about the student outcome, it's not about my job, it's not about your classroom getting more resources based on my performance or what have you. If you could have a shared sense of responsibility for the children, and you put their need before everybody else's, including teachers. And I've always been a proponent of that argument, that school cannot exist without students. So they have to, their needs and their priority, whatever they need has to be the priorities. So and you mentioned about, and I think what I want to talk about is the intangibles of the teachers. I love the fact that you mentioned data, because without evidence, you could really assessing or helping teachers could really turn into this verbal criticism, and that could be personal. But I think when you see the evidence, such as at our school, what we do is we videotape teachers and let them take a look at their own practice. And I've actually videotaped myself in the past, and I didn't know I was making funny faces when I said certain things, and I go, wow, I need to change that. I had a poor habit of, like, I had my glasses in the past, and I had a poor habit of raising my glasses and making this face, and kids were laughing at me. And I didn't know why they were laughing at me, but somebody said, look at yourself in the video. You're making a funny face. I didn't know. Something as silly as that, to maybe your walking pattern is only the certain path. You're constantly walking back and pacing back and forth between point A to point B without really circling all around the classroom. There's gazillion things that you can learn from, say, videotaping. And as you said, peers evaluating. And what we do is we really share with our teachers, this is the form we're using. Take a look at it. Be mindful of it. There's no surprise here. You know what you're going to be assessed on. You know, we just want to see how well you do that. And I've learned those. I've gotten those forms from you and from APU, and there are a lot of gazillion resources that are out there. So I think evidence is key. Data is key. And I want to add this, how you feel about it. You know, at our school, every semester, at the end of the semester, we ask our students, how is your teacher doing? And we, from 6th grade on to 12th grade, every semester we ask them, how was your teacher? And we use the same standard or criterion that we use to judge ourselves. We ask our students, was your teacher prepared? Was she answering questions? Do you feel that she was passionate about teaching? Do you feel like she helped you to grow in your interest in the subject matter? How was the classroom environment? Did you have any questions that you asked that weren't answered? So we have 15 or 20 questions just related to the teachers. And when we use that data, you know, kids will tell you. Kids will tell you whether they like this class and learned a whole lot or not. In fact, I've been asking our teachers in the last 4 or 5 years since, you know, COVID is to use this form and say, here it is. Try to do this maybe 2 to 3 times during the semester. And I learned that from you, because I remember going to one of the classes at APU, you actually said, well, these are the stuff that this is the form that you guys will be using to evaluate me at the end of the semester. I want to know, how am I doing? And I thought, wow, it's either Dr. Quinn is incredibly insecure, or he is really confident about improving himself as a professional. And I took that to heart, and I put it to practice here. And I think that kind of openness to how students feel, because it can't be just one-way instruction. It has to be a mutual give and take with the students.
That's a very good point, Dr. Song. And I remember when I was a 7th and 8th grade middle school math teacher. I don't know where I got the idea, but I wanted the students to tell me as their teacher, just like you were talking about, what do you think about my teaching? And in other words, it didn't come from the front office, didn't come from the principal, it came from me. I'll be honest with you, it was scary. I mean, the kids were 100% honest about what they were saying. I guess legitimate questions about instruction, about interest, about do they understand what I'm doing? Do they understand math? I don't remember all the questions, but the first time I read it, it was a major shock to me to realize I was not doing as well as I thought I was doing. As a result,
I had teachers, when I shared their data, I had teachers cry in front of me.
Yeah.
Devastating.
Well, number one, teaching is dramatically more complex than what most people think that it is. The more you're familiar with educational research on what is effective teaching, when they study teachers who have a high percentage of students who score well on standardized tests, who score well, who get into the top tier universities, when they study those types of teachers and they learn, well, what are they doing? You know, what makes a difference? Then they begin to realize that, wow, it's not just 1 or 2 things that make you a good teacher. It's very complex instruction. And for some subjects, it's even more challenging, because if you take a subject like trigonometry or chemistry or physics, these are complex subjects that are not easily understood by the average person. So going back to my I wanted to get some data on how I was doing as a teacher. So when I first read the results, I had 5 classes. I probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 175 students. So I got responses from every one of them. I read through each one of them.
Hmm.
Didn't cry. I didn't start crying, but I was close because it was quite devastating. But what I did was I listened
Hmm.
to my students,
Yes.
because what I saw, there were patterns. The students in period 1 said this. The students in period 2 said this. The students in period 3 said this. So what was I led to believe? That they're right, that I am not doing what I thought
Yeah.
I should be doing, what they thought I should be doing. So I changed my instructional style. So I continued to ask them for feedback, and guess what? The feedback got better. And that's the same thing with our teachers today, is helping them to understand the value
Yeah.
of collecting that data. Some teachers are naturally, they feel nervous about someone else coming to the classroom, whether it's a peer or it's an administrator coming in and collecting data. They feel nervous. That's why I always think it's wise to sit down with the teacher first to go over, here's
Right.
what we're going to be doing together.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference. And the more you do it, in other words, you can't do it one time. I mean,
That's been an ongoing thing.
it has to be an ongoing thing, and collecting the data. Uh, and I wish I could say that, every single teacher I was working with, I was able to collect, say, 3 data points. I wasn't always able to do that. It's just the job is too demanding, so you don't always get that.
Yeah.
But typically, we got enough data, enough evidence to be able to help teachers say, well, yeah, I agree with that. I think I would like to know more about that. And sometimes, if I saw a trend, then I would say, well, maybe this is what all of us need to be doing as a school. Other times I would say, well, this is a teacher who has a unique need. He or she has a weakness in a specific area. So the initial thing I would do is, that's all right, here's what the data says. Why don't we do this? What I'd like you to, I have a couple articles, research-based articles, peer-review journal articles that would help you understand, here's what the research says, and invite them to read that. And then going back into the classroom, helping them implement, maybe me going into the classroom, modeling that particular strategy or technique.
In the business world, when people are hired, there's always mentors or upper level executives who would guide them for many years to learn. But somehow we've gotten into this funk in the field of education, especially K to 12 education. And now we won't go into higher education professors because they think they know everything. Maybe they do in terms of contents, but they're really, a lot of times they're terrible.
That is true.
Yeah. So I think our teachers, whenever I talk to our students, I always tell them about what I would call 5 elements of highly effective teachers. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot, and maybe you could come up with a few things that as the qualities of highly effective teachers. But these are the 5 elements of highly effective students that I've observed. One is that most highly effective students are physically fit. They're not obese. They're not lazy. That comes as a surprise, but I have not seen too many students who are out of shape and who just never took care of their body, who was able to do well in school.
Good point.
Then they have the baseline of intellect. And what I would say intellect in terms of, they're curious. They have the curiosity. They kind of want to know. They don't want to just go like, what's going to be on the test? They want to know why. Why does it work this way? How am I supposed to, take this information and apply here? They have the basic intellect and curiosity. 3, they have the motivation. They have somehow taken the external stimuli and internalize it, where they feel motivated. I want to do this. I want to achieve this. You find students who are saying, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I want to do next year. They're not motivated, and there's no reason why they want to learn and grow. Prioritization skills. I really would consider this to be more of a time management skill. High school kids, middle school kids, games versus homework. They go, most students who are doing poorly will play the games first and then do homework. Whereas students who do well are saying, okay, you know what? Games are fun, but I gotta take care of this first. They prioritize.
Right. Good.
And the last thing that I see is relational skills. They know how to have good friends. they're just not just classroom nerds, but they're able to talk to their friends and get help. Especially they develop this relational skills with teachers. I cannot overemphasize how important it is for the teachers to have a great relationship with teachers.
That's right.
So those are the 5 things: physical fitness, intellect and curiosity, motivation, prioritization or time management, and relational skills. I have observed that to be the 5 elements of highly effective students. And perhaps we could write a book about that, Dr. Quinn. But
Excellent.
anyway,
Yeah.
what do you think are some of the qualities of highly effective teachers?
Well, I think some of the ones you just mentioned would be from the classroom, from the students to the teachers, the exact same ideas. Is that, one second here? One of the same. Sorry,
That's okay.
dog needed out of the office here. The same thing. We see some of the teachers who they also should be physically fit. Then you see some of these, the idea of the teacher who really enjoys his or her profession in the sense that, one, they want to learn more about their content. They're not teaching the exact same thing year after year after year. They're looking for new material, new resources, maybe different ways to make it more interesting. Maybe it's more relevant today. So they're curious about
data.
Exactly. They're looking for an updated way to teach it, where perhaps the models, maybe in a math class, they're looking for models of how this algebra problem would work in a laboratory, for instance. So they're looking for something that's more contemporary, and so that would be related to the students. The research shows that students typically learn well when they understand the context within their own culture. So for an effective teacher is doing the same thing. One of the unfortunate aspects of most schools, especially here in California, is the teacher and students not always have the same background and cultural background.
Right.
And so as a result, the effective teacher needs to learn how to take this body of knowledge, this content, this standard, whatever the subject might be, and put it into a context where it's relevant to the student. So an effective teacher is working on relevancy. How can I make this relevant to these students? The research shows us that when teachers are able to teach the relevancy of content, then the students are more likely to pay attention. If the idea is, well, I'm never going to use this stuff, why should I pay attention? Yeah. But if they see the relevancy because of a career or because of their culture, or maybe they say, well, my mother, she's in that profession. I can see she talks about this. So you're showing the relevancy. So I think that's another aspect of some of the reasons why it's important, not important, but a characteristic of a highly effective teacher to help students understand the relevancy of the subject matter they're teaching.
Well, we could probably extend this podcast to another one, and I really do want to plan on having a few more down the line.
Excellent.
But we're excited about having you work with our teachers. We're going to utilize technology to do this. It's a novel approach.
Excellent.
Probably for you and probably for us. But if we should be practicing what we preach, right? We have to find ways to effectively and efficiently work with our teachers and supporting them. So I welcome and I appreciate your being available to work with our teachers. I know that as a result of your expertise and your experience and sharing all of that, our teachers will be better, effective teachers, which in turn will produce greater results for our students in terms of outcome and learning and achievement. So we're looking forward to having you support us. And we thank you so much for just being a school leader, one who sees the big picture and guides the board. So I want to thank you for joining me today, but also want to thank you for all that you do for New Covenant Academy.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I enjoyed our time together and look forward to our next time together.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for joining us in our second podcast with Dr. Quinn about professional development at New Covenant Academy. I hope you learned something that is relevant to your children and why we do all that we do at NCA, the things that we do behind the scene as teachers and administrators. These are sometimes, it's behind the scene work, and it's a lot of stuff that we do when no one is watching, but it takes a lot of effort, coordinated effort, professionals and devoted people working together so that we could have the wonderful results that we have at our school and for your children. So thank you for joining us, and join us next time for another relevant and important podcast. Thank you, Dr. Quinn, for being with us.